and Corey Goldberg. We're looking forward to hearing about caring for the caregiver. Big round of applause. And for Caitlin, too.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, thank you, everyone. Before I get started, I am going to distribute some handouts, and I'll talk a moment about why I'm giving them to you and how we're going to use them in our conversation today. Wonderful. Scotty's got my back there. And if anyone needs a writing utensil, okay, you're good. All right. So you are in the right place if you're interested in hearing about caring for the caregiver, how to recognize and address parent and caregiver burnout, and I'll add parent stress as well. I know that it has been mentioned there is the opportunity for the SIB shop. I don't know, as I look around the room, if any of you as parents or caregivers identify that there is a sibling or a child in the room who doesn't need to take on the parentified role of worrying about their parents. I really encourage you to give them some place to be so that their needs can be met and you can focus on your needs for the sake of this conversation, so that you are not wearing the dual hats of taking care of yourself and taking care of your children. The QR code here, if any of you are interested, is how to contact me, but we'll talk more about that in a bit. Okay, so this is me. I know in the last presentation, they talked about using a mental health counselor as a resource, and that is me. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. I did PhD programs both in clinical psychology and in school psychology, and part of the reason for that is because I really am aware and interested in the systems in which people function and how that impacts their experience. So everyone has either been a child, has a child, gone to school. So understanding the role of the school, the role of the family, the community, the larger systems, and how that impacts your individual experience is something that's important to me. And I specialize in treating anxiety, stress, burnout, and trauma among adults and young adults, especially parents of children with high needs. I have a practice along the northern suburbs of Chicago where I see clients, but I'm also licensed to do online therapy to individuals in over 35 states across the US. And I'm developing online learning resources so that there can be instruction that's more broadly available to people who want this information. Okay, so you have done a lot today and you've taken on a lot of information, and it's important information. You're learning about how to care for the financial needs of your family, the genetic needs of your family, your individual needs. And I want you to kind of take just a moment to bring your minds and your body all into the same place to take on this information today. And so we're going to do a really quick nervous system regulation break. You don't need to go anywhere. You just need to look around the room. And as you look around the room, I want you to identify for yourself 5 things that you see. There's no right or wrong answers. Just notice 5 things. Maybe notice their color, their shape. Okay, great. Now, as you look around the space that you're in, 4 things that you can touch. And if you can touch them, maybe notice how they feel, their texture, temperature. If you can't actually touch them, imagine what they might feel like if you could touch them. Like, I'm really curious about those walls back there. Okay, now as a hush falls over the room, 3 things that you can hear. Two things that you can smell. And 1 thing that you can taste. I know you haven't had lunch yet. Maybe a drink you can sip, a mint you can pop. Or if you can't taste anything, see something and maybe imagine what it would taste like. Someone else's delicious looking coffee. Okay. So thank you for taking a minute to just bring yourself into this moment, prepare yourself for this information. To talk a moment now that you all have the handout in front of you, I know that the timing today has shifted a little bit. We're probably going to go right up to that lunch and poster session. So I don't know that we'll have much time for Q&A. the form there, please write down your questions as they come to your mind. If we don't have an opportunity to answer questions, I'm going to collect the handouts at the end, and I will look over what are the most frequently asked questions, and I will type up responses and I will send them to you in a PDF. You can write your email address and contact information on there so that there's no concern as we're going on here about your needs not being met. They will be met and supported. There's also some rating scale information on there that you can focus on in a bit. And at the bottom, just some note-taking space, because there will be some time today that we'll be reflecting and writing things down. Okay, so I wanted to take just a moment to quickly review some of my values, some of the reasons why I'm here today instead of outside enjoying this absolutely gorgeous Chicago weekend or doing a load of laundry or spending time with my family while I'm here. And these specific values are not listed in any particular order. There's no implication that you should share any of these values. But in essence, in a nutshell, what drives why I'm here today, a lot of the work that I do and will inform some of my suggestions and recommendations for today, is I value reducing unnecessary human suffering. Okay, I have to not be able to hold this. So how that relates to some of my goals for the presentation today, I want you to come away from this time spent today having had an opportunity to connect, to experience understanding and connection that can come from within, connecting to parts of yourself and shifting in your understanding, connecting to other people in the room, just knowing that you're in the space of community, connecting to the words on the screen or things that I might say, that you're going to learn, you're going to gain some information about parenting stress and burnout, and that information will be hopefully helpful to you. That you'll have an opportunity for experience, that you will learn, identify, and practice strategies for burnout prevention and mitigation, one of which we've already practiced, just taking a moment to kind of bring ourselves into the present and let go of other distractions, thoughts, sensations that might be happening within us. And lastly, that you'll be empowered, that you'll gain resources for future learning and support. And I would expect that you will leave here with more questions that haven't been answered, some of which I'll be happy to try to answer for you, but hopefully will spark some desire for you to find out more for how to take care of yourself or the people that you care about in these ways. And so my guidelines for participating in the presentation today, once again, informed by reducing unnecessary human suffering, check in with yourself. Identify what you need. If you need to take notes, if you need to step out, if you need to walk around, you've been sitting for a really long time. If you need to get up and stand in the back, take pictures of the slides, whatever it is that you need, just notice that and attend to that. And please also be mindful that the people around you, other people may have different needs, and that's okay. See if you can attend to your needs while also attending to theirs. To that end, I want to add kind of this idea of the dialectic, holding two things that seem to not be compatible at all times. I want to be real clear that when we're talking today, that I am aware that you love and are committed to your child, the person in your life who is affected by KCNQ2, the person who has motivated you to come here. And at no point is that being questioned or challenged or forgotten. And it's a lot. And we're here to focus on that piece of it too, that we can hold both of those things. I'll also add that when I'm talking today, I'm going to use the term parent. When I use the term parent, I'm really referring to any adult who is functioning in a primary caregiving capacity for a child. So that can be a guardian, a grandparent, aunt, uncle, but just know that I'll be using that term parsimoniously. Okay, so this is the first part for you to do, this self-reflection activity, and you can use that bottom part of the handout to jot down notes if you want. I want you to reflect on what you value that led to you being here today, to perhaps getting on a plane or traveling in a car, to carving out this time to be present at this conference. What has you here in this moment? And what are your goals? What do you hope to accomplish out of being part of this conversation or part of the conference overall? So take a minute or two and just reflect on some of those values, and please do jot them down. Take another few seconds. All right. Now, of course, what's most important is that you be present and aware of what your values are, what your goals are. If anyone would like to share, I invite people to do so. I am not that person. I would never be the one to raise my hand in a group of people and share anything about myself, and that's okay. But if anyone does have any thoughts or anything they want to share about their values, what has them here today? Yes, Scotty. Community. Okay. So I love that. Anyone else? Connection. Fantastic. Okay, so I will keep that in mind, community and connection, and I hope that you're all present to that in the space today. So moving on to talking a little bit about parenting stress. Now, this is where I often notice that research investigates things that most people say, well, right, yeah, that's no brainer. When you think about parenting stress, I'm sure you're attuned to what that is, how that feels within your body, how that functions within your day-to-day life. In the research, parenting stress has been defined as when parenting demands exceed the resources available to meet those demands. So what are some of the demands that we encounter in parenting? Demands enhance our stress. It brings up that anxiety, that how am I going to get all of this done? And that can include things like the daily care needs of our children, medical care, our own fatigue, our own stress, judgment that we perceive from other people or that we have for ourselves, and how we're functioning in that role. Some of the resources, the stress alleviating factors, are things like knowledge, compassion for ourselves from other people, physical energy, time, money. So now I'm going to switch gears a little bit to talk about how our body functions in reaction to stress. Now, there's a lot of really great information on this slide, and the person who put it together, Ruby Jo Walker, was kind enough to allow me to use this in my presentation. But I want to broadly call your attention to the 3 zones, this green, yellow, and red zones. Now, this is how our body functions, how our nervous system functions in all of the capacities that it has to encounter. And the green zone is the safe zone. And the safe zone is where we do all of the things that mammals, that humans are designed to do. It's where we connect to community, where there's social engagement, where we connect to people platonically as well as amorously. It's where we regulate our circulatory system, our immune system. It's where we do all of the functioning. We're digesting our food here. We're eating a sandwich. We are going to the bathroom. We are taking a walk. We're connecting with friends. We're smiling. We're resting. All of those things happen in the green zone. The green zone is when we have these signals for safety. Now, when our nervous system detects that there is a threat to our safety, something that now is disrupting those processes, something that has to be addressed, we pull some of those resources from that safe zone, and we say, now is not the time to eat a sandwich or take a nap. Now is the time to tackle this thing that we are encountering. So we pull those resources, we mobilize that energy to overcome what we're facing, either to avoid it, to prevent it, or to get away from it. Now, back in the days of yore, this was happening as a lion is running down the plains, and we're thinking, oh no, I have to get away from that lion, or I have to figure out if I can survive an attack from the lion, if I can triumph. In our typical day-to-day, we aren't encountering a lot of lions. What we're encountering are things like managing the school, figuring out how we're going to support long-term care. How are we going to manage our family finances? How am I going to get this kid from point A to point B? Do I find the right therapist to meet their needs in this capacity? How do I communicate with the school and advocate for their needs? These are the stressors that we're encountering in our day-to-day. And if we can use our resources to address those stressors and eliminate the stress in that particular moment or overcome it, we then move back down into the green zone. Whew, okay, got it all done, got everyone fed and cared for and made it through another day, and everyone's in bed. And now I can rest. I can exhale. I can call a friend. I can take a bath. I can do some of those safe zone things that help me recharge and heal and grow so that I'm ready to take on the stress that I'm going to encounter next. The red zone is what happens when the the opportunity to recharge, to go back into that green zone, doesn't happen often enough to allow us to recharge enough to meet the demands of the yellow zone again. And so we start to shift from this I can take it on mode to I can't. And we start to conserve our resources. We start to pull things in and dump things off of our list so that we can just make it through. I'm not going to triumph over this stress. I'm not going to be able to come to a resolution. So what can I do to at least make it out the other end alive? And we really start to pull in those resources. And we see that in some of the discussions that are listed here. We start to numb out. We start to distance ourselves from the intensity of the emotions that we're experiencing because they're not pleasant emotions. And being really intensely connected to them isn't going to help us navigate what it is that we have to navigate. We check out, we disconnect from the people in our lives. So this is what our body does. This is what our nervous system is primed to do to help us survive. So having said that, what is parenting burnout? Now, I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands and share if this is something that resonates with your experience or something you've observed in others, but just thinking about this concept, this terminology of burnout, having seen that trajectory, that red zone, how might you imagine burnout feeling? Again, maybe this is a familiar feeling. Maybe you have some sense of time spent in the red zone, but just think about that piece, burnout. And once again, the research looks for answers in these questions that might be well known and well understood to the individuals experiencing it. But in order to quantify it and study it, the research has defined burnout. So unlike ordinary and transient parenting stress, burnout is a chronic stress-related syndrome that is experienced in the role of parenting. Burnout initially started to look at burnout in people's occupation, and it's only in the last 15 years or so that burnout research has extended to looking at parental burnout. So this is specific to burnout in that parenting functioning in that parent role. And that parental burnout happens when there is this imbalance between the stressors and the resources. If you can keep it in balance, you can move between that green zone and that yellow zone back to the green zone and navigate through it. But when it is chronic and when it severely overwhelms the resources, parents can't cope. They move into that energy conservation zone. Now, according to research that has looked at over 42 countries, burnout occurs all around the world. It varies in the degree to which it occurs, but on average, about 5% of parents at any given moment, anywhere, are experiencing burnout. That number is higher in individualistic cultures as opposed to collectivist when we think about things like community and community support. So in the US, it's about 8%, but as you might imagine, in particular parenting communities where stressors are higher, like parents of kids with high support needs, we see higher levels of burnout as well. So how do you know if it's burnout versus parenting stress? What are some of the defining features? Well, once again, the research has talked to parents who are in burnout and learned about what their experience is like, and have used this information and statistics and factor analyses to determine what are some of the hallmark features of parent burnout. And there's 4. The first of these is intense physical and/or emotional exhaustion within the parenting role. These are reflected in statements like, I feel completely run down by my role as a parent. The second is feelings of being fed up in the parental role. I feel like I can't cope. It's just more than I can handle. I can't imagine how I'm going to keep doing this. The third is emotional distancing from children. And this is a hard one. This is a hard one for a lot of parents to reconcile. But when we think of it in terms of that chart, that green, yellow, and red zone, we can kind of understand why this happens. It's not intentional. It is survival. That I have to conserve my resources and I don't have enough to do all of the things that I need to do and bring my best self to it. So if I have to choose, I'm going to do all of the things that I need to do, and I'm not going to bring my best self to it. The kids will be fed, they'll be clean, they'll go to the appointments that they need to go to, but I don't have the energy to always do it with a smile on my face or with fun and with games. or really connecting to them as I might be able to do if I had more of those resources available. And lastly, and I think that this is very important as well, parental burnout is marked by a sense of contrast with the previous parental self. Parental burnout aren't parents who don't care. They're not parents who never cared. Parental burnout happens for parents who have a vision of who they want to be in their parenting and what their values are, and are recognizing, I don't have enough to be the parent I want to be. There aren't enough resources. I can't spend enough time in that green zone to replenish and recharge myself, to show up in the yellow zone the way that I want to address the typical stressors of my parenting life and do it with my well-resourced self. And that's reflected in statements like, I feel as though I've lost my direction as a parent. So why does this happen? Well, as we've talked about, if the parenting stress is one that you can navigate and that you can handle, and you then get to compensate with enough time spent in the green zone that you're recharged, burnout doesn't happen. Burnout happens when the stressors are coming on fast and furious, and there isn't enough time to go back to that green zone and feel safe. And so the way that the body helps itself to survive, to get through, is pushes you up into the red zone, tunes you out and numbs you from some of the intensity of the difficult experiences as you conserve that energy. And so when I think about that yellow zone stress, when I think of the things that parents, like many of you, may encounter in your typical day-to-day, I think about, okay, today's the day. We have the appointment with a developmental pediatrician. We've been waiting 9 months for this appointment, but it's at 4 o'clock. And that means that if it's at 4 o'clock, I have to pick up early from school. I can't wait for transportation to bring my child home. I have to be there in the pickup line. But in order to be there in the pickup line, I actually have to be there 30 minutes before school dismissal to get to the front of the pickup line. Because if I end up in the back of the pickup line, it's going to take me 20 minutes to get to the front of the pickup line to get my child. And then I'm going to get caught in traffic and I'm going to be late. So I see this resonate. This is maybe a little bit familiar. And I also have to keep in mind that I have to wake up their sibling from their nap, because we're not going to be able to just wait for your sibling to be dropped off at home. And so I've got to bring them, and they're going to be crabby, and I have to bring toys and things that are going to entertain them and occupy them, because you never know how late the appointment's going to run and how long we're going to be in there. And I have to bring snacks as well. And as you think about all of these things, all of these stressors, I don't know about you, but I'm like feeling it. Like I'm feeling my body kind of go like, oh gosh, this doesn't feel well. That's that yellow zone. I'm mobilizing for action and energy. But it's a lot. It drains those resources. And so let's take a moment and bring that nervous system back down again. We're going to do another nervous system regulation break. And for this one, we're going to do a breathing activity. Some of you may be familiar with this. For some, this may be new. This is called 4x4 breathing, or box breathing. And the reason it's called this is because the breath pattern is going to be a 4-count inhale through the nose. We're going to hold that breath for 4, exhale through the mouth for a count of 4, and hold again. And I'll count you through that. Now, if you want, some people are more connected visually, or imagery is helpful. Imagine while you're doing this, picture someone in your mind who is a source of support for you, who helps you feel calm, who helps you feel safe, or a place. Maybe it's some beautiful beach somewhere that you can imagine, that when you picture that place, you feel at ease, you feel that sense of calm in your body. So have that in mind if you're going to imagine something, and we'll count through the breath. We're going to do this for a few rounds. If this isn't something that is safe or available to you, please opt out. So breathing in through your nose and hold. Exhale and hold. Breathe in. Hold. Exhale and hold. And one more round in and hold. Exhale and hold. Good. So now as you check in with that nervous system, hopefully it feels at least a little better than it did a moment ago. And so back to the conversation about burnout. How do you start to notice indicators of parent burnout? What might this show up as? Well, avoidance of potential stressors. I know that I need to contact the attorney to talk about how we get the special needs trust put in place and to help me understand what the difference is between an ABLE account and a special needs trust, but I'm not making the call. I've been given 3 names, but I'm just not doing it. I just don't have it in me. It's just one more thing. Numbing or distancing behaviors. Kids are finally in bed and I know I'm exhausted, but I'm just scrolling through on social media, or I'm doing more work, or I'm having a drink. Those numbing behaviors. Difficulty connecting with our emotions. Once again, when you're in that red zone, it's adaptive to turn down the volume on your emotions because a lot of them are very heavy. But turning down the volume on your emotions also turns down the volume on all of your emotions, the heavy and the light ones. It may make it difficult to feel your feelings, to feel happy or connected, to connect with that community. And if you can't feel your feelings, it's understandable that you would have difficulty regulating them. And that might show up as having really big reactions in situations that maybe don't warrant those reactions if you look at them in isolation. It may show up as feeling just intense sense of guilt or shame around your parenting, which unfortunately contributes to that isolation and disconnects us from community. And difficulty regulating your physiological functions. As we talked about, those things happen in the green zone. And if you're not getting a lot of green zone time, if you're living a lot of your time in the yellow and the red zone, you might notice that you don't sleep well, or you have gastrointestinal problems and ulcer, IBS. You're always kind of fighting off something. You never quite feel healthy or well. And your libido, like, forget about it. That is not on my agenda. Once again, these are maybe relatable. And possible consequences of parent burnout. I don't want to spend too much time here because I generally like to come from a place of power and intention rather than fear. But parent burnout is not good. It is not good for parents. It is not good for children. It is not good for the family system. The red zone is a place of survival. It is not a place to stay. And if you are in the red zone, or when you find yourself in the red zone, some part of you should know that and should tell you this is not a safe place to be. Ask for help, get what you need. And people in the red zone are least likely to be able to notice and monitor that they're in the red zone because they're downregulated. They don't have resources available to self-reflect and to notice their feelings and to notice what's happening. So if you see this around you and someone you love, don't leave them there. See what you can do to get them the help that they need to move back safely into the yellow zone and back to the green zone so that they can spend more of their time there. Now, once again, I really want to point out that parental burnout isn't an inevitability. Parental burnout is an imbalance. It's this situation that, if left unattended, of having more stressors and not enough resources to address the stress, has people in a not great place. So there are some ways to prevent or to mitigate parental burnout when we see it. There are many. I'm going to outline 3 of them here. And one of those is to reduce the stress or reduce the stressors that one experiences. Another is to increase resources, what's available to address the stress and stressors. And the third is to increase the nervous system experience of safety. We'll talk more about that in a moment. Now, I will say, in my experience talking with a lot of parents, that this is the slide that most makes people want to punch me in the face. Because of course, Dr. Goldberg, thank you. I should have less stress and I should have more resources, and I will go buy my lottery ticket as soon as I leave here. And on my way home, I'll broker world peace and we'll all be better off for it. This is not just a slide that I'm going to leave you with. We're going to talk through some of how to do this. But first, I want to introduce an idea, a concept that I first encountered when I was an undergrad taking a Japanese culture class. And from what I understand, this is something that has been pulled into the business world as well. I've never actually taken a business class, so I didn't know that, but I did bring it into my clinical practice. And that is the concept of Kaizen. Now, the Japanese concept of Kaizen is continuous improvement through small, incremental changes. And so as we think about reducing stress and stressors, as we think about increasing our resources, and as we think about having more time for nervous system experiences of safety, this is what I want you to be reflecting on. What are the small, accessible ways to start to make some shifts that over time can create continuous improvement, can shift that balance so that more time is spent in the green zone and there's less risk of being pushed into red. So what does that look like when reducing stress and stressors? Well, making some hard choices, looking and revisiting as your life circumstances change, as the needs of your family, your household, yourself change. Look at what the stressors are and reflect on what can be eliminated. What isn't essential for your family, for yourself at this time? And it may be useful to reflect back on those values that you wrote down earlier or that you thought about. And that may help guide you. Once again, for me, reducing unnecessary human suffering, that helps me a lot when there might be invitations that come forward for my family that I say, gosh, in order to go to this, we might need to have someone there who can meet the needs of this particular child who's going to have higher needs for support. And if we can bring someone, a caregiver, a grandparent, someone who can address their needs all throughout so that they're taken care of and we're free to engage in the experience, okay, maybe that's the right choice for us. But if that resource isn't available, maybe saying no is the right choice for us, because it's going to pull more resources than we have available. And then the whole week is going to be thrown off, or the bedtime routine or the sleep schedule for all of us is going to be thrown off. And it's going to pull more resources than it warrants based on my values, because those resources are precious and I need to direct them towards other stressors that I'm aware of and other stress that I'm going to need to take on. Also, this idea of differentiating stress from stressors. Now, I love Nagoski and Nagoski, their book Burnout, which speaks more generally to burnout, not parental burnout specifically, but they talk about the distinction between the stress and the stressor. The stressor is the thing that causes the stress. It's what we notice through our senses. Oh, there's this thing that is out there that I'm going to need to tackle. The stress is what the body mobilizes, what it activates so that you can tackle the stressor. Caring for your child's needs lifelong is a stressor, and you can't wait until that whole stressor has been addressed to release the stress that you experience when you are tackling the individual specific things that you may need to tackle. So if you can clarify for your body, okay, I'm caring for my child, and that's something I will be doing for a long, long time. And today the stress was that I needed to get them to that doctor appointment, and I did. And we got through it. And now when I get home and the kids are in bed, I can say, whew, and I can call up a friend, or I could turn to my partner and I can say, I'm so glad I got through that, and that's done. And we can laugh about the fact that these are the things that we celebrate in our life. And we can kick back and maybe watch a movie together and hold hands and feel a sense of community and connection, while we celebrate the fact that we got, like, that one's done. We can check it off the list. We got through the task of the day. Increasing your resources. What does that look like? Well, now that you've kind of maybe knocked off some of the stress or the stressors that you have decided you don't need to hold on to, you may have some additional resources available that you can plug into different areas. Or as you once again reflect on your values, reflect on your goals, you can maybe reallocate and say, the time and money that I was spending in this particular therapy that I thought was going to really move the needle for my child, I'm noticing it's kind of not. And in order to get us there and to get them into the session and to deal with their sibling and the wear and tear on me and how exhausted I am, and I'm battling with the insurance company because they keep denying it, even though they've already approved it, it's just not worth it. The juice isn't worth the squeeze. And so I'm going to let that go for right now. And I'm going to reallocate this into this other area that I've heard about, that I've thought about, that I think is actually going to be more beneficial for them, or more beneficial for me, or more beneficial for our family. You can identify additional resources, and you've all got a gold star in that because you're all here. Are there communities that you can connect to? People who can provide support and understanding that help you have that connection, that green zone connection, or knowledge bases that you can tap into. You don't need to reinvent the wheel and try to figure out what is the difference between a special needs trust and an ABLE account. You can maybe tap into someone who knows and can tell you. Strengths that you can leverage. And that means kind of knowing yourself and your own needs, your own strengths. Maybe it doesn't take a lot of your resources to do the dishes at the end of the night and load them in the dishwasher. But if you need to deal with getting the kids to bed at the end of the night, after you've spent the whole day pouring that kind of energy into caregiving, that's going to take a lot more out of you. And maybe you don't have that resource available. So perhaps you can negotiate with another family member, a partner, a caregiver, to have someone else handle the bath time and the bedtime, and you can do the dishes and it doesn't take as much from you. Or maybe you use paper plates that night and you throw them away and you spend that time meeting a friend for coffee or for a cup of tea. If it's night, maybe coffee is not the right thing. Are there supports that you can access, things that you can tap into? Rather than running faster on the hamster wheel, is there a different way that you can be approaching things so that your resources are getting more bang for the buck? I think in the interest of time, I'm not going to dive too deeply into this slide, but all of it is to say that time spent practicing that green zone experience, that felt sense of safety for your nervous system, strengthens that muscle. It strengthens your ability to move out of that yellow zone and into the green zone because you've had more practice with it. And so how do we increase our practice, that nervous system experience of safety? Well, we try and foster internal cues for safety as well as have more external cues for safety. That can come in many different ways. This list is certainly not meant to be exhaustive, but practicing mindfulness, bringing yourself into that present moment like we did at the start today, letting go of the things that aren't in the right now, because oftentimes in the right now, we're safe. If you're not safe in the right now, your body knows it. It's going into that yellow zone. It's mobilizing to take care of you. But usually that stress is something we're anticipating, or it's something that we're ruminating over. It's not something that's right now. Connecting and regulating your breathing, that slow breath pattern is a cue to your nervous system that you're safe, because when you're not safe, your breath changes. You're running, you're getting ready to take on that stress. And if you can remind your body that it's okay, that breath pattern can help to slow it down. And you may have experienced that when we were practicing today, that even when your body is feeling stress and it's mobilized for action, you can bring that sense of calm to it. Challenging or shifting distressing thoughts, that's not a simple thing. That's not an easy ask. But hopefully, even just looking at something like that nervous system chart where you see that green, yellow, and red zone helps maybe to shift. Oh, when I'm shut down, when I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing, maybe I understand differently why that is. And instead of beating myself up about why didn't I had all day today to make that phone call while the kids were at school and I didn't make it. Why didn't I make it? Well, because I don't have the resources. I haven't had enough green zone time. And so that shift can also help with this next one, cultivating self-compassion. As you can imagine, when you find yourself struggling in the yellow zone, beating yourself up about how you're struggling is much more likely to push you up to that red zone than to get you back down to that green zone. If you can have some compassion for yourself, I'm struggling because I'm under-resourced. And I can't expect myself to function like I'm in my green zone state when I'm under-resourced. Rest, physical activity, kind of burning through some of that mobilized energy, that adrenaline, that cortisol by physical activity can help cue to the body, okay, we've done what we needed to do, that you were mobilized for action, and now we can let that go. We don't have to hold that intensity, that activation within us. And I wouldn't be much of a trauma therapist if I didn't acknowledge that healing trauma is also a helpful way to foster cues, internal cues for safety. And I'll add that trauma, any time spent in the red zone is traumatic to be there. It is traumatic to be under-resourced, to not have your needs met and to be tasked with doing things. That can also include things like fertility, pregnancy, birth trauma, family experiences from family of origin, one's own experiences in the education system or in government or other oppressive systems where you might be needing to function in your day-to-day or on behalf of your children. Connecting to external cues of safety can come from positive social connections. That connection, that community that we talked about earlier, hopefully just being here, even if you haven't talked to the person next to you, knowing that there is a person next to you and that some part of them relates to some part of your experience, that gives a cue for safety. I don't have to hide or mask or do this all alone the same way I might if I'm not feeling connected to an understanding community. Time spent in nature is very regulating to our nervous system, regulating and grounding sensory experiences. These are going to be different for every person, but creative pursuits, doing something, anything that cues to your body, I'm safe. Because once again, when we're in the yellow zone, we're not painting a picture. We're not cooking a meal. These are green zone tasks. So time spent doing them is time spent cueing your body, letting it know that it is safe. And laughter is another green zone activity. And so time spent laughing, doing things that make you laugh, spending time with people who make you laugh, or remembering times that you were laughing are all green zone nervous system messages that says, in this moment, you are safe. So another opportunity for self-reflection. But I want you to be thinking about Kaizen. What are small changes that you have made or that you can make to reduce your stress, reduce your stressors, or feel moments of safety within your nervous system? And I'm going to challenge you to take a minute or two and think about this and write at least one thing down. And if you notice as you're thinking about this, that closing, that ooh in your body that says, no, that's too big, that's too much, I can't, here are all the reasons why that's not going to work. That I can't is that red zone signal. So think smaller. Just keep thinking smaller. Maybe it's drinking a cup of tea, even if it means you have to take it in your travel mug with you to the various therapies that you're going to. Or turning up the music in your car and singing like you've lost your mind as you are driving home. But take a moment and just think and keep thinking smaller. Not easy. If you're stuck or stumped, some ideas to consider that have come out of conversations with other parents. These can be little changes. That headphones up there, when I'm feeling overstimulated, my sensory system is at its brink and I know everyone's coming home and it's the nighttime and There's a lot of boisterous noise, but it's just too much. I pop in that headphone in one ear and I can listen to some soothing classical music. And then I can navigate through the tasks that are happening without needing to tune so much into the environment that is overwhelming to me. I have something that's regulating. I know when to call it and say, that one more email, that one more task I'm trying to do before bed tonight, I don't have the resources for. So I'm just going to go to bed. And in the morning, when I have more resources, I can tackle that. I can do that and be in the yellow zone and get through that stress without it pushing you to the red zone. So I encourage you to reflect on that activity, to continue to reconnect with that idea for yourself. If you're noticing that felt sense of, I am getting out of balance, the stress is starting to overcome the resources that I have available, and what is something I can do right now to help shift that balance? Maybe it's just that I notice it and I pause and I take a couple of breaths and I just say to myself, you're struggling because this is hard. And I show myself some compassion. So resources for the future, or to possibly explore. None of these are have-tos or even recommendations. They're just opportunities, things to explore. The first is a book that I referenced earlier. It's called Burnout, The Secret to Unlocking the Stress Cycle. And if you Google it, they have a website that also has some additional resources for support. There's some videos, there's some PDFs of guidelines. It's not specific to parent burnout, but it's specific to the burnout phenomena in general. It is written for an audience of people who navigate the world as female identified. And so there is a lot of focus on that particular experience. But I think that the information in the book is really relevant to understanding burnout and how to address it more broadly. Self-compassion. Dr. Kristen Neff is sort of the self-compassion champion, and her website has guided meditations, audio as well as video, that some of which are just a few minutes, some of which are longer. In particular, she has self-compassion guided meditation for equanimity that is geared specifically for people in caregiving roles to extend compassion towards the people who they care about and also to themselves as they are navigating that role. I saw through KCNQ2's website that they have a parent support group, other local support groups, whether it's for special need parent support or other local groups that say, I want to support my passion, my green zone time. I want to find a support group of people who are really into cooking Mediterranean food. And that's what you do, is dial into a cooking class of people who you can really dive into that passion with and really recharge yourself in green zone time. That's fine too. That may not be available at this point in your life, or it may not be practical. The researchers out of Belgium who have done a lot of parental burnout research and who developed the parental burnout assessment, their website allows you to take the parental burnout assessment, and that can just be good information. They'll give you a score. Well, they don't give you a score. They give you a range that says, hey, it looks like parental burnout is something that should be on your radar, or might be something that there's a risk for based on how you're currently feeling in this moment about your parenting experience. And once again, it is moment to moment. We hope people don't stay in burnout, that they're helped to move out of that place. Supportive therapy, and I know this was talked about in the last presentation as well. Once again, not a recommendation or requirement, just an opportunity and a resource. I have some ideas here because sometimes I'll get calls from people and they say, I don't even know where to begin. I'm not sure. I know therapy is a good idea, but therapy where they don't understand what my life really looks like, where they're making recommendations that don't make sense for me, or where we're moving in directions that don't seem to be the directions I need to move in to have an impact that I want to have in my life. Some things to think about or to consider are therapists who specialize in parent burnout or special needs parenting or related areas. Treatment approaches to maybe explore and learn a little bit more about to see if you're drawn toward them or no, that's not a right fit for me, might include things like acceptance and commitment therapy, self-compassion work, or trauma therapies like EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, IFS, which is internal family systems or brain spotting, all things to possibly explore just to learn more, just to see if this might be a resource that you can tap into that would be of value to you. And then there's me. I have my information there. You can contact me through the first QR code for my website, or to learn more about online parenting courses that I'm in the process of developing. And if you would pay me the kindness of taking a minute or two to just go through the rest of the handout and give your feedback. If there were questions that came to your mind, there aren't opportunities to ask. I don't have anywhere to be, but I know that you all are kind of tight on time and have places to go. I'm happy to stick around and answer questions that people have, but please do write them down so that I can see what questions are on people's mind and get that information and those answers to everyone so that they can benefit from them. So thank you all so much for your time today. And I acknowledge you for creating space to focus on yourself. And I encourage you to continue that as you leave today and move forward back into your lives. Thank you.
I really appreciate that. I think that was a wonderful session, and we're really, I think it's something we don't talk about enough. So thank you. We have about 15 minutes until lunch. So with your permission, and only if this works for you, what I thought would be nice is people to the point of doing what you need. If you want to walk out, go ahead. If you have a question and you want to raise your hand, or you all give a few minutes.
I have time.
Wonderful. So I'd say, don't worry if you have to leave. Go ahead. We get it. We're running over, and that's the nature of trying to always fit in more than we have time for.
Understood.
Which is kind of my chief. Anyway.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, that's a really good question, right? How do we heal trauma while we're still in it? And so some of that work can come through looking at what is driving the distress and teaching some of these resourcing strategies of how to continue to recognize within yourself, how to regulate so that that balance continues to shift. It's difficult without knowing the nature of the trauma, because oftentimes it's not just what's being activated in the moment, it's what's being activated in the moment and held onto that then contributes to sort of that activation the next time something similar to that happens. Rarely is it just what is going on in one's life in the present moment. It's the lingering and the impact. So if it is just specific to, things are so out of balance for me that I'm in all of this red zone time, and how do I navigate through that when I still have to handle all of these things that are happening in the present? That's a conversation that can happen with the therapist to kind of drill down to what is driving those trauma reactions and how to lessen them or how to heal from them, so that when you then into the next situation that is similar to that, you're not coming at it from as depleted a place. You're not being activated perhaps as much, and you're not staying in that space as long. I don't know if that answers the question.
When I'm constantly reading every day, major that when you handle failure,
Yep.
How do you ever feel something that you then go through the day?
Yes. So that hypervigilance is that yellow zone state. That's that alerting, that being aware of where might there be a threat or a danger that I need to mobilize for action. And so how I hear you asking, how do I not carry that with me? Because that's helpful. I mean, it's adaptive. I need that hypervigilance in order to take on the genuine threats that I might need to be able to respond to. And that's where we try to look at a couple of things. Number one, shifting that balance so that when there are those moments that you don't need to have that level of hypervigilance, you're not still carrying it with you. That it's not 24/7 that you have to have that hypervigilance, even to be able to signal to your body, for these next 5 minutes, someone else is monitoring my child. And I can now actively take these minutes to let me know that I am in the safe zone. There are other things, and it's a little bit more like into the nitty gritty about identifying what it is in particular that you might be hypervigilant to or why, and are there experiences, once again, I alluded to some past traumas. I imagine that there's no one in this room who hasn't had trauma related to monitoring their child's health and safety needs, because at one point you weren't aware that there was that need, and at one point you became aware, and that was probably an overwhelming situation that the nervous system could not process adaptively and keep balanced in that moment. And so you went into yellow zone and red zone activity and kind of pushed all that other stuff to the side. And trauma work can help you kind of take that out and process it so that it is held within the nervous system in a more completed and processed way. So that perhaps the reaction from a particular sound or a particular visual or a smell or a moment isn't as activated. So those are some of the ways. And again, it's going to vary with every individual and what they need and with the person with whom they're working. But it can be helpful to put yourself in a situation where you can have those conversations and see if there can be some relief, some things, some hypervigilance, some activation that's being carried that doesn't need to be there, so that the resources can just go to the activation that does need to be there.
So is it fair to say this kind of care could work with people or be valuable, even for people who are in an active situation where they have medical needs for their child? That's not going away. There's going to be, is there still a way to engage with this kind of practice, what can be of value while something is ongoing?
Thank you. That's a wonderful question. And that brings us back to this idea of the distinction between stress and stressor, that the stressors are, you can't wait for the stressor to just never be there before you can give yourself a break from the stress, that activation, that hypervigilance in your body, that yellow zone state of monitoring internally, externally, that you can learn how to have the distinction between the stress response and when it's needed and the stress response when it isn't needed, so that you can conserve those resources and they can be more available to you, and that you have them when you need them. Because if you're in that red zone, you're depleted. You don't have them to bring anymore. And it does take a toll. Even if your will is there to be hypervigilant, physically, when we're not spending that green zone time, our body will eventually let us know. You can't just keep doing that at the same rate anymore. Yes.
You know, things like that. I've been saying it about, I think it's being now, which is sort of being, you know, some of that with population, find helpful for dealing right now. And I appreciate what you just articulated. That was mindfulness that you just gave an example of, that bringing yourself to the moment, that understanding what you can and cannot control, some regulating your own breath, doing what can I do in this moment? How can I bring myself into this moment? How can I show compassion for myself? Expecting me to control what is beyond my control is not a reasonable or compassionate or fair expectation. So all of those things that you practice outside of those moments, make them more available to you in those moments. Having that self-awareness so that you can meet the challenges with kindness and with reason and with tools can reduce some of that panic, some of that anxiety, some of that mobilization into danger. And there's so many different strategies, and each person and their needs and what they respond to are going to be different, which is part of why I try to have us practice a few different things in this time. And I so appreciate the example that you provided as well. And that's that connection, that community, that understanding that we gain from one another as well. Talking to people who have been in this situation and hearing what are things that they have done and found useful is such a wonderful resource as well. So thank you. Yes.
and the strategy. A lot of it. And I think you look at those here, proving that, we've got, enough here in the truth. I think what we're actually people that of that is guilt. And, it's one thing to kind of like group and have the time to pick on yourself to be able to pronounce that green zone. Then that means either you're challenged not getting what they need or someone else has to pick up that. And how do you deal with that guilt?
Well, I think that there can be a number of ways. And the question was, how do you deal with the guilt of taking time to invest in yourself when you know that that time is coming at the expense perhaps of other people, that someone else needs to fill in and do the work that you were doing, or that someone needs to go without? And some of that can come from that presencing of the values and understanding that if I take care of myself, then I'm going to be more effective. I'm going to be able to spend more time in that yellow zone as opposed to that red zone. Some, once again, is thinking about how we're allocating our resources. Much of what we talked about are ways to regulate our own body and our own mind. If we're in a stressful situation and we're thinking all kinds of thoughts that are negative, that is not a kindness towards ourselves. And we can just shift those thoughts in that moment. It doesn't mean that we're taking time away. You can be doing what it is you're doing, but if you're approaching it differently, it can conserve some of your resources. It can bring you more sense of safety as opposed to feeling in the red zone and overwhelmed. So those are some suggestions and ideas in investing in oneself. That guilt and shame, that is more of that bigger, deeper work of understanding where that's coming from and what ideas people have adopted that have them feeling guilt or shame for taking time to meet their needs. And I don't mean to say this in a pie in the sky way. I know we all have different demands and different privilege, but the reason I talk about burnout is because it's not a luxury to take care of ourselves and keep us out of that red zone. We can't stay in the red zone. It's not sustainable. And so it's about figuring out how do I create that balance in my real life in a way that can be sustainable until I need to recalibrate and figure things out again and make that next thing sustainable. And so even recognizing that might help to release some of the guilt, because it's not a luxury.